Hey everyone, before we get started in today's stories, I just wanted to let you know that some of these are a bit dark and disturbing. If you'd like to skip over any of the dark stories today, you can check the pinned comment and I'll have the stories labeled in case you want to skip any of them. All that being said, if you're ready, let's go ahead and get started. Here in the States, we have a dollar store called Dollar Tree. My daughter used to love going in and just looking around. We went in one afternoon in about 2006. We were just looking around and enjoying our time together and leisure. At that time, she was about 10 years old, so I'd allow her to look at things she wanted on one aisle as I looked around at items at the end cap of that aisle, or I'd be on directly the next aisle. Every few minutes, I'd go onto the aisle and check on her and see if she wanted to move on to something else. Suddenly, I noticed a tall man just kind of hanging around where we were browsing, and he didn't seem to be looking at anything in particular, and honestly, not looking at anything at all. It was more like he was just waiting for something, and it kind of set off my senses, and it gave me a strange vibe. So I went directly to where my daughter was and stayed directly next to her with my hand firmly on her. I think that she could tell something was off. She looked at me quizzically but didn't verbally question me. I tried changing aisles but staying in the same area, but within seconds he would be right next to us on the new aisle. I quietly told my daughter to please not ask questions, but to please follow me no matter what I did or where I went. Surprisingly, she did so, because ordinarily she was full of questions about literally everything. She's got ASD, and she just likes to get info on whatever's happening. I decided that I would cross the store to a far corner in the opposite direction, and you guessed it. Within a minute, he was right behind us. I immediately went to another far part off of the store. Same thing. Within a minute, he was right behind us. I did this about 4 to 5 different times, and each time he ended up where we were. The stationery, the grocery area, the makeup aisle, etc. I was very nervous, but I was young, and I thought about telling an employee, but I decided that I didn't want to cause a scene. Again, I was a young mom. At some point, I told my daughter the basics of what was going on, and I told her to understand under no circumstances to leave my side or let go of me. I was so freaked out, I decided we'd just check out and come back another day. Well, as soon as we got in line to check out, the man got in line at the register right next to me. And it seemed as though it was because that line had roughly the same amount of people, and perhaps he wanted to leave the store as we were leaving. The second we finished checking out, he headed straight for the door. I told my daughter to take my hand and to not let go no matter what. And again, she did exactly what I said without question. I told her when we get to the car to immediately get and lock your door while I get in. She did so. I took a chance to look back. And yes, this man was coming right behind us, but far enough away that as we were walking very quickly, we had time to get in the car without him catching up. We lived right down the street from the store, but I took a very scenic route home just to make sure I wasn't being followed. I don't know what his intentions were, but it felt sinister whether it was or not. To this day, my daughter brings this story up every now and then, and it's been almost 20 years since it happened, and I still get sick to my stomach whenever I think about it. Whatever he actually wanted, I really hope to never be in that kind of situation again. This story may not be scary in the sense other ones are, but at the time it was very unsettling. It took place in Glasgow in 2011. I went to a college outside the city center, and the story involves a couple of people in my course, which was television broadcasting production. Louise was a very well-liked student on the course. She was very friendly, very bubbly, and very pretty. She had bright dyed red hair and very pale skin. She looked a little like Hayley Williams from Paramore. There were a couple of guys on the course who were friends with her, but were obviously keen on being more than friends with her. There was the time before I was aware of the incel community, and I was naive about how some young men view women. These guys made sexist comments and would make inappropriate jokes about women. These two guys, Mike and James, were obsessed with filmmaking and the internet. They had allegedly both made inappropriate comments to Louise, and although she didn't appreciate them, she appeared to not let it bother her. I hadn't heard any of these comments myself, but in hindsight, I wish I'd stepped in. I did once ask her if she'd like me to have a word, but she said no and appeared very confident that she'd handle it if things went too far. She was sure they were just joking and were just very immature. As the months passed by on the course, things seemed fine, and I thought about the things Louise had highlighted about James and Mike. Towards the end of the course, we were tasked with making 2-minute short films, and our course lecturer divided us all into teams of 3. You can probably guess who Louise ended up with in her team. My short film was a very poorly made science fiction comedy thing, which wasn't remotely funny. Louise's film was due to be a crime thriller type thing, which sounded really good, but it didn't really work out like this. So the story goes, Louise, Mike, and James scripted out their short film and seemed happy with their script when it came to filming. Louise didn't really want to act in her film. However, she was convinced to do it by James and Mike. They filmed their short in James' house, and Louise was to play the victim of a home invasion. His parents were away on holiday, so they'd have the house to themselves. When it came to filming, Louise was to sit in a chair and to be taped to it. James and Mike duct taped her wrists and arms to the armrests of the chair, and they taped her ankles together. Record was then pressed on the camera. She was feeling a little anxious at this point, as there was something very off about their demeanor, and Louise wished she'd refused to be the actor for this scene. She was about to suggest that they pause, but before she could get the words out, she felt duct tape quickly being wrapped around her mouth. This took her by surprise, as this was not in the script. Her nostrils were flaring and she tried talking, but her mouth was heavily taped, so this wasn't possible. She then tried to say, "What the hell are you guys doing?" But no words made it through the tape. Louise said that she was sure she was having a nightmare at this point and closed her eyes, hoping to wake up. However, when she opened her eyes, she was devastated to realize she was bound and gagged in James' house for real. She caught her reflection in a nearby mirror, and she said her cheeks were bulging over the shiny silver duct tape, and her hair was in agony as the tape was applied very tightly to it. The camera had been turned on, and James and Mike were now just staring at Louise behind the camera. She was breathing very loudly through her nose, and she was terrified. They finally said after many minutes, "We know this isn't part of your script, Dawson, but we thought we'd improv." Louise was terrified and confused. "We know you weren't keen to act, so we added this to get that reaction from you. It looks great." Louise was shocked that this was part of some weird improvised segment that these two creeps had added purely to get a genuine reaction from her. These were short films for a film course that nobody would even watch. They weren't supposed to be Oscar-nominated shorts, so the fact that these two took it this far was disturbing. They began to remove the gag from Louise's mouth, and she grunted and mumbled as her hair was being pulled out with the removal of the tape. As soon as the final piece of tape was removed from her mouth, she began screaming at them and rightly berated them for this. They apparently were shocked and stunned by her reaction. Louise demanded that they cut her arms and feet free and stormed out of James' house. Our course lecturer spoke to both of them, and both were only given a warning about this. We couldn't believe it. If anything, they should have been kicked off the course at the very least. To make things more infuriating, both of these creeps continue to work in the TV industry to some degree. Louise does too, and she's been very successful. I have also been grateful to have had a successful career in television here in the UK for the last decade or so, but the fact that these two continue to work in the industry despite their views and behavior leaves a really bad taste in the mouth. The television and film industries obviously have a very bad record for having unsavory people in front and behind the camera, so in some ways, I'm not surprised that these two are still present in the industry, but I do wonder if they've done anything else such as this. I hope that they have matured and moved past their incel stage, but it really irks me that Louise didn't really get any form of justice for this incident. So, I'm a 23-year-old female. This happened when I was 15 years old. It was February 2017, and I got a friend request, and I accepted it. It was from this guy from Serbia. Martin was the name he used. He had started talking to me, and we quickly had started talking every day, just as friends though. But then later on, he told me he loves me, and I also started developing feelings for him, so I told him I loved him too. I was so in love with him that I was blind to all of the red flags that he was showing me. He never wanted me to tell anything to my parents. He also didn't seem very happy when he realized I told my parents something as simple as being in a relationship. After a year, it's 2018 at this point, his behavior towards me suddenly changes. He went from being nice and funny to calling me a whore, accusing me of cheating on him. I have never done any of that. I cried and kept repeating that I didn't cheat on him and I'd never do that. Mind you, we're still talking over a video call. I lived in Germany and he lived in Serbia, but he started talking to me, probably because I'm originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina and because I was young, too dumb to know better. And at one point when he had started trusting me again, after his paranoid phase that I've mentioned went away, he said that he wants to propose to me and marry me. I said yes. I was so happy because I truly loved him and I wanted to be his wife. However, I knew there was a problem, and it was my parents. I was 16 and I wanted to move and get married. Of course, they wouldn't let me, so he made a deal that he's going to get me a van transportation to Serbia. That's what we did. On the day before I was supposed to flee, he told me to not bring a lot of clothes because he'll buy me all the clothes I need when I get to Serbia. Now, of course, looking back, this was a humongous red flag. But back in the day, I thought it was nice because all he cared about is me and everything else including clothes came second. I also packed my wallet along with my charger, phone, and passport. I snuck out of my house at 3:28 a.m. My mom was asleep. I couldn't get a hold of my shoes because they were in a separate room that had this door that makes a loud scraping noise as it rubs against the wood. So I put on my slippers and left the door slightly ajar, because if I closed it, it would make that rubbing noise and my mom would probably wake up. I got in a van that was near the hotel, which was 10 meters from my house. After 15 minutes, the driver got out, I greeted him, and I got in the van. We started driving and picking up other people. At 8-something a.m., my mom called me and asked me where I was, and I lied to her and said that I was at a store just buying things. She told me to send her my location, and I knew that she knew I was trying to flee. I hung up because I knew if I answered the phone, she could probably track my call, so I always let the phone ring without answering. She called the police, and she also called my dad. They've been separated since 2003 and divorced since 2007, so he lived in a completely different city an hour and a half away from her. He was on his way to his friend's house to return a vacuum, so he immediately rang the doorbell and told his friend to just take everything because he's in a rush. His friend asked why he was in a rush, and he said it's because his daughter ran away. The friend gathered all of his guns, put them in the truck, and they made themselves on their way to Serbia. My mom called my boyfriend and asked him where I was, and we actually made up the story of me and him breaking up so she'd believe I'm just somewhere in a park drunk and drinking away my pain. In order to somewhat prove that claim to her, I had started slurring my texts and misspelling words on purpose just so that she would think I was really drunk. Obviously, she didn't believe it, but she went around and searched every park just on the off chance that I'm there. She asked him again where I was, and he said he didn't know because I never told him. Then she called one of her cousins. He's a special story. He knows a lot of people, especially criminals. He told her to mention some guy called Nanad Crutches. Yes, the things that help you walk. And that's when he said there was no need for violence, and he immediately told her that I'm in a van and on my way to Serbia. My mom at one point texted me and told me she's just going to talk. She doesn't need me to say anything. She just wants me to answer the phone and listen to what she says. I did, and she then convinced me to give the phone to the driver. I said that I can't do that right now because he's driving. I told her I'll give it to him when he makes a stop, so I did. I called her when we made a stop, and she told me to give my phone to the driver. He answered the phone, and I don't know what she told him because it wasn't on speaker, but she definitely told him I was underage, that I had epilepsy. That is true. I've had it since the age of 12. And that she had already called the police, gave them my information so that they could immediately contact the border control, letting them know that they should arrest anyone with my passport and not let them through. The driver then realized there's no way out if he takes me with them. Then he started negotiating where to drop me off so someone could pick me up. He never wanted to drop me off somewhere where you had a lot of police. That should have also been a red flag, but it wasn't. He decided to drop me off somewhere next to some fast food place. I got off, he left. Then when I was next to some sushi place, I called my dad and told him where I was. He told me to turn on my location, and I did. Then he told me to wait outside because he'll call the police to get me. After about 10 or 15 minutes, 2 officers came up to me and told me to follow them to the car. I did. They drove me to the station and searched me and my bag. At one point, I almost got into a fight with one of them because she was messing with my bra and moving it. Luckily, they both decided I was clean. They put me in this holding cell. I had a bed, a metal toilet, and a sink. They also gave me a blanket and told me what button to press if I needed something. I fell asleep, and then after some time, one of them came and woke me up and told me that my dad was here to pick me up. So I got up and she led me to the office where my dad was along with his friend talking to the chief. He took my passport. I then got in the car with him and his best friend. He seemed very relaxed, and he even answered in a funny, goofy voice when I called him. That's how I knew he was absolutely pissed. His friend got to his house, then my dad got out of his car and told me to get in his car. I did. He got in and he took me to his house so he could sleep a little bit. His wife came while I was sitting in the living room and she asked me why I did it, that I could have been kidnapped and killed, that or sold to the human trafficking ring. Then she also told me that she would have killed her daughter if she tried the same. After about an hour or two, my dad woke up and they both greeted him with good morning. I said the same, but he just looked at me all pissed without saying anything to me. He then got ready and he told me to get up. We walked to his car. Mind you, he's not talking to me. He only talks when he has to. I got in, and then about halfway through the drive to my mom's house, he told me that I'm lucky that my mom called and specifically told him not to do anything to me. She said she knew I would have escaped again if he tried intimidating me, because then he said that he would have kicked me repeatedly with his legs until I couldn't get up. I didn't say anything. He drove me back to my mom's house. She didn't really say anything either. She was just happy I was back. Then 2019 came. This is when we were arguing nonstop. Yes, we kept talking. My dad at one point took away my phone, so then I couldn't talk to my boyfriend anymore. Well, I had saved up some money and bought myself a new one. I remember in Bosnia visiting my relatives, and I told him to come to Bosnia to see me. I said that if he doesn't do it, I'd leave him. I gave him 24 hours. I was in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and he was in Serbia. The drive from his town to mine would have lasted about 4 hours, so he could have come like 6 times. The next day, I was getting ready to hit the city, so I texted him and asked him if he's at the pizza parlor I told him to be at. He said he has bad news. I didn't care to listen. I said it's a yes or no question. After some time, he said no. So I told him, okay, we're done. I hung up the phone, blocked him, and that's how my love saga ended. But it wasn't the last time I'd heard from him. After 3 months, I've heard from someone that he's accused for the organized kidnapping, torture, and murder of a girl who was also 17 at the time. This took place that was 2 hours away from where my relatives in Bosnia lived. The case was gruesome. I heard she was found in a sewer. Then after the medical examiner performed the autopsy, he said that she was so beaten to the point her shoulder was dislocated, and that she had also been repeatedly penetrated by glass bottles. 2 years later, 2021 rolls around, and he made a new profile on Instagram and texted me. I didn't answer. Then 2 years later, 2023 rolled around, and again he made a new profile and texted me on Facebook. I couldn't see what it was because he had deleted the text right after sending them. Then months later, he started texting me again. 2024, he kept texting me. Even now in 2025, he still hasn't stopped. He's still texting me and he's still trying to find me. Luckily, I've moved to a whole different place in Germany. I'm also enrolled in medical school. However, this did mess me up a little. I'm heavily opposed to any type of emotional connection or dating. I'm opposed to anything that involves trust because I just have issues with trusting people. I've seen the worst they're capable of when you trust them. So now I don't want to put myself in that situation by trusting anyone. I've been single for 6 years, and I see myself not finding anyone anytime soon. I have a message for everyone. Be very careful. Don't lose your logical thinking just because you've happened to fall in love. Love is no longer what it used to be. Now it's used as a weapon. This happened when I was 13 in the spring of 2004. I grew up in the country in a small town where doors tend to not be locked at night, at least back then. This is going to be from the point of view of my parents, as I didn't know about this until after the fact. I think I had slept over at a friend's house the night before this particular morning, and said friend's mom drove us to school that day. My dad was getting ready for work one morning, and while he was waiting for his truck to warm up, it was still cool in the early morning, by the way, at this time of the year, so yeah. Well, anyways, he went into the garage for something. Our garage was half workshop, half storage, and he went into the workshop half, likely for a tool or something. Out of the corner of his eye, he had noticed a pair of sneakers underneath some insulation. Someone was sleeping in our garage. Within an instant, he flew into the house past my mom in her office, and in a calm but serious tone then said, "Call the sheriff," as he went to go get his gun. He then stood over the man with his gun on him until the police arrived. The man didn't try anything, as he was apparently high on some drug. I'm not sure which. Like I said, I grew up in the country and our town didn't have its own police force back then, being that small. It ended up being the state police that came out, I think 45 minutes or so after my mom called. They arrested the guy, and come to find out, he had just been released from jail the day before, his mom paying his bail. He was a junkie and was there on a drug charge. They were driving home from jail and they got into an argument. She kicked him out of her car and he started walking, eventually finding his way to our garage. Later on, after the police took the man away and my dad had gone to work, our neighbor came over to my mom to let her know that a ton of my dad's tools were in the backyard. Apparently this guy had planned on stealing my dad's tools to sell, but was either too tired or high to get very far and decided to just take a nap in the garage. And you see how that worked out. My parents went to court for this man's trial, and from what I remember, he was sent back to jail, likely staying there much longer this time, since he was only out on bail before. This may not be too scary, but as an adult, I see much more to be afraid of now versus as a teen. My parents always kept me safe, and I pretty much had a sheltered, albeit happy childhood. What really scares me now looking back is that in the workshop there was a hidden key to our house. It was there when I could find it to get into the house after school in the event I ever lost my house keys. If he had gotten into the house, what could have happened that night? All I know is I'm grateful my parents were armed and knew how to handle this situation. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and take care, everyone. So let me start with this. I'll be using aliases for this story, as my coworkers and I would like to keep our identities hidden. I'll be referred to in this story as L. I'm a 19-year-old male with high-functioning autism. I mention it because I notice I often have a problem actually knowing I'm in danger and reacting as such unless I get hurt. I work as an assistant photographer / cashier at a booth to take Santa photos. It was Black Friday at the mall that I was working at, so there were a lot of people, mostly parents and their kids. Even encountered a Karen at this shift, but that's another story for another time. Later into my shift, 2 hours before we could all clock out, we got a family of around 18 people, all even getting dressed in suits for these photos. So I was sharing some of the anxiety that me and my coworkers felt as they were probably going to be here for a while. Then suddenly, we hear this massive stampede of footsteps as me, my coworkers, the family, and Santa, and even those waiting in line all turn to look as we first see a panicked crowd of people running towards the exit, presumably. We then hear a booming voice. "Get down!" At first, I thought this was an earthquake that hit the mall in a specific spot. Then I thought of the worst possible outcome, even though I and no one else heard gunshots from where we were. I got on the ground with my coworkers, but my coworker Pamela had the idea to hide in the curtained cubby that's right next to the photo printers. Seeing as we're out in the open, we join her as we cram ourselves into the cubby with some of the family joining us. I had to motion Santa to get down through the top opening as he was the most exposed, even though it likely wouldn't have made much of a difference. I used my phone camera as a mirror to make sure Santa was okay, and he was, thankfully. We had to stay there for a bit, and I was just so anxious thinking that the shooter might turn the corner and we'd be sitting ducks, but that didn't happen. Security tells us to get up and to quickly and calmly proceed to the exit. One of my coworkers handed Santa his cane and told me to get out of here, as Santa will be fine. So I ran outside still in my uniform as my coworkers and Santa soon followed. As if it wasn't confirmed by this point, there was an active shooter scenario as I saw SWAT begin to enter the building. We all sat in the parking lot with a lot of others. I had to call my boss to inform her of the situation. I also let Pamela use my phone to call her dad. I wasn't about to deny that as I was texting my mom the entire time as well. After things died down, I began to walk down the street as my parents were waiting for me, and I just wanted to get home by this point. I'm glad my coworkers were able to punch me out of my shift. Seeing as it was my first 8-hour shift, I really appreciate that. I wrote this about a week after the shooting. Thankfully, they caught the guy. He was a 17-year-old kid. As for the victims, only 3, and thankfully no one was killed. I'm so glad it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. This really reminds me that life is short and can easily be shortened if a maniac is having a bad day and decides I'm their target. Maybe a bit misanthropic of me, but when it's your life, it's really difficult to feel bad for the bastard who could potentially take it, at least in the moment. But anyway, that's my story. Maybe it isn't as scary as some of the others, but knowing you could be moments away from getting shot is scary. Even though I didn't feel as freaked out as I could have been, I think it would have been worse if I heard gunshots. Never thought my first job would have this happen, but we can never predict these things. I'm just glad I got out of this alive and unscathed. Last night I was doing my own thing, probably playing a video game or something, when the power suddenly went out. This isn't unusual where we live. It happens sometimes because we're in a small town in Mexico. Since there was nothing else to do, I decided to go to sleep. At the same time, my mom was upstairs on a hammock using her phone. The puppies usually follow anyone who moves around, but that night they eventually settled down. She was on a call with someone, and at one point the person had asked her if she was alone. She said yes. Later, she explained that she thought that he meant just her, not including her kids, which was my sister and I. After the call, she went downstairs, did the dishes, and then came to sleep. All of us sleep in the same room because the other rooms are currently being used for the dogs. Around 1 to 1:30 a.m., I woke up to knocking outside and whistling. I thought about moving, but my mom immediately whispered very seriously to me, "Don't move." So I stayed completely still. This part is really important. My bed is one of those string beds that make a lot of noise if you move even a little. There was also no power, no AC, and it was hot. I barely moved the entire time because I was scared of making noise. The man outside walked into our property, knocked on 2 doors, knocked on the front window, and even tried to open the window. Our doors are loud and squeaky, so it was obvious he was trying not to make noise or expose himself. Eventually he stopped, and then he left quietly. What makes this worse is my mom's reaction afterward. My sister and I were scared and we couldn't sleep properly. My mom, however, went back to sleep and was snoring like nothing ever happened. When my sister asked what was going on, my mom lied and said it was probably just the dogs trying to get in, even though there was no barking and the dogs were most likely sleeping upstairs. The next day, which is today, my mom finally told me the truth. The same man who asked her if she was alone was the one who came to the house, which I kind of already figured. She said she plans to tell him that if he does it again, she'll report him to the police. But we live in a very small town with barely any police presence and no clear addresses. Honestly, I'm really frustrated. Someone tried to enter our home in the middle of the night, and my mom downplayed it and lied about it instead of prioritizing safety. I don't know what to do next. Should I tell my stepfather? He lives in another country and he only speaks Spanish, but I feel like he should know.